Best known to history as Queen Margot, Marguerite de Valois was the seventh child of Henri II and Catherine de' Medici. She was born on the 14th of May, 1553, in the Château de Saint-Germain, where she spent her early years. During her childhood, Marguerite had as companions her two brothers, Henri, Duke of Anjou, and François, Duke of Alençon. When she was 6 years old, her father, King Henri II, died in a jousting accident, and shortly after that, the elder brother of Marguerite, Francis II, was crowned king. After the death of Henri II, the diminishing authority of the crown was disputed by different groups of nobles, such as the Bourbons, the Montmorencys, and the Guises, while religious clashes between the Protestants and the Catholics were becoming more intense. When Francis II died in December 1560, his brother Charles, who was only 10 years old, ascended the throne as Charles IX of France. But the authority passed into the hands of Catherine de' Medici, who actually governed during the reign of her son. Trying to gain support for the Protestant cause, the Huguenots were campaigning to make converts among the nobles, and the court became the center of the struggle between the Huguenots and the Catholics. Catherine tried to mediate the disputes between the two factions, but she did not adopt a fully neutral stance and ended up being distrusted by both sides during many years of religious civil wars which would engulf the Kingdom of France. In the spring of 1562, when the First Civil War broke out, the royal children were separated, and the Queen Mother kept with her the young King Charles and her son Henri, Duke of Anjou. Margot and her younger brother, the Duke of Alençon, were sent to the Château d'Amboise, where she continued her education under the supervision of the most capable teachers of the day, employed by her mother, studying the classics, grammar, history, the Holy Scriptures, along with music, singing, painting, and dancing. Meanwhile, Margot's brother, King Charles IX, had been declared of age, but the effective authority remained in the hands of his mother. The princess was about 16 years old when her brother Anjou encouraged her to be in the presence of her mother as much as possible in order to promote his interests and help him remain in the graces of his mother while he was away engaged in the war as the king's lieutenant. Margot, who was fascinated by her mother but equally frightened of her, said, "I had been so strictly brought up under the queen my mother that I scarcely durst speak before her, and if she chanced to turn her eyes towards me, I trembled for fear that I had done something to displease her." As a result of being admitted to her mother's confidence, Marguerite underwent a significant change. She became a political woman who was beginning to learn the inner workings of the affairs of the court. At 17, the princess fell in love with Henri de Guise, who was 19. She was attracted by his chivalrous manners and his elegant demeanor. The very handsome duke was the hero of Catholic France, who worshipped him. According to Brantome, the court chronicler, the beauty of this rare princess was universally admired. Marguerite had a fair white face and very black hair, which she knew very well how to curl and arrange, but most of the time she used to wear blonde wigs. She was able to adapt herself to every mode, and if other ladies tried to imitate her style, they could not rival her. The Duke of Guise aspired to marry the princess, and their love affair, carried on for some time, until one day when one of their letters was intercepted by Anjou. Envious of the military achievements of the Duke of Guise, of his courage and his political influence, Anjou decided to bring the matter before Catherine and the king. Not wanting to allow the House of Lorraine to gain more influence at court, the royal family would not entertain the idea of such a marriage. So the Duke was forbidden to see Marguerite, and the princess was ordered by her mother to end her relationship with the Duke of Guise. The princess would be married to someone else instead, and her life would take a different course. Meanwhile, the Peace of Saint-Germain, which brought to a close the Third Civil War, was declared, and the Huguenots were granted many concessions. Wanting to consolidate the peace and reconcile the Catholics and the Protestants, Catherine and Charles IX planned a marriage between Marguerite and Henri, the Protestant Prince of Navarre. To her friends, Margot declared that she would never resign herself willingly to the loss of the Duke of Guise, to whom she had given her affections, and would not accept for a husband the Duke's greatest enemy. Jeanne d'Albret, the mother of Henri de Navarre, was not happy either about her son marrying Marguerite, but the Huguenot leaders encouraged her to consent. So in January 1572, after having taken farewell of her son, Jeanne travelled to Blois to discuss with Catherine the terms of the marriage. Writing to her son to express her views about Margot, Jeanne said, "She is beautiful, discreet, and graceful, but she has been reared in the midst of the most vicious and corrupt society that ever existed." The marriage taking place in Paris was problematic for the Huguenots, as they knew how much the Parisians hated the Reformed religion and how bitterly they resented the Peace of Saint-Germain. But Catherine and the king insisted on the marriage taking place in Paris, as it would show France and the world the commitment to calm the conflict between the two sides. Jeanne reluctantly agreed, so in May she arrived in Paris to ascertain the attitude of the citizens towards the House of Bourbon, but whilst there she died suddenly on the 9th of June 1572 at the age of 44. Devastated by his mother's death, Henri of Navarre contemplated the postponement of the marriage. But Admiral de Coligny, the leader of the Huguenots, convinced him to go ahead with it, and on the 20th of July, Henri of Navarre made his entry into Paris, accompanied by 800 Huguenot nobles and gentlemen. While the King of Navarre was engaged in paying his addresses to Marguerite, Coligny was having discussions with King Charles on various political matters. A magnificent amphitheatre, covered with cloth of gold, was put up before the porch of Notre Dame, and on the 18th of August 1572, people came out in their thousands to see the wedding procession. What animated them was a sense of curiosity. About the royal union there was little enthusiasm. When the cardinal asked Marguerite whether she accepted the King of Navarre for her husband, she refused to reply. At that moment, the Duke of Guise raised himself above the other nobles to watch the face and eyes of Marguerite. As she stood silent, her brother Charles gave her a little push at the back of her head and made Marguerite nod, a gesture which was accepted as her consent. The wedding celebrations lasted until the 21st of August and ended with a grand tournament in front of the Louvre. But despite the festivities, suspicion and distrust dominated everywhere. Unhappy because her son, King Charles, was often in the company of Coligny, who was beginning to dominate the king's mind on various political affairs, including that of a war with Spain, given that Coligny wanted to help the revolted Netherlands, Catherine felt that she was losing her influence over her son. She saw the danger and decided to have Coligny eliminated. So, on the 22nd of August, there was an assassination attempt on Coligny, but it failed. Trying to defuse the situation, the king ordered an investigation, but the Huguenots were furious and accused the Guises of their involvement in the matter. Catherine and her son Anjou were terrified. If the Duke of Guise disclosed that orders had come from Anjou, their involvement would mean disgrace and exile. So Catherine, her advisers and Anjou plotted to eliminate the Huguenot chiefs, beginning with Coligny. She informed Charles that all Catholic France was unhappy that the king had allowed himself to become a tool in the hands of Coligny. After admitting the part which she and Anjou had played in the attempted assassination of Coligny, she insisted that the Huguenots were already plotting, putting the lives of the members of the royal family at risk. There was only one way of escape: to get rid of the Huguenots and their leaders. Eventually, Catherine was able to convince the reluctant king to agree. Men were gathered and the town was guarded so no one could escape. The plan was to be kept secret. About that, Marguerite said, "As for me, no one told me anything of all this. I observed everyone to be in motion. The Huguenots were suspicious of me because I was a Catholic, and the Catholics because I was married to the King of Navarre, who was a Huguenot." Before dawn broke on the 24th of August, 1572, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre had begun, and thousands of Huguenots trapped within the walls of Paris would perish. Margot saved the lives of many Huguenots, and according to Brantome, including that of her husband. Although Henri of Navarre abjured his faith and converted to Catholicism, he was still regarded with suspicion, and he became a prisoner at court with only a few liberties allowed. But he found his most loyal support in his wife, who felt sorry for his situation and decided to help him. In terms of personality, they were very different. Margot was sophisticated, clever, and well-read, often skipping her meals in order to finish the book she was reading. She also loved life and enjoyed the amusements at court. Henri did not possess polished manners, but he was generous, brave, and always happy to take part in wars. So, given the circumstances, the couple had to adjust to their new wedded life. From the start, Henri of Navarre ignored Margot and did not attempt to gain her affection, being more interested in other women. Moreover, he never tried to hide his love affairs from his wife. For her part, Margot looked for affection elsewhere and had plenty of admirers to choose from. One of those was La Mole, a handsome nobleman who was in the service of her brother Alençon. Meanwhile, the Fourth Civil War broke out, and Alençon sided with Henri of Navarre with the intention of putting themselves at the head of the Huguenots and disaffected Catholics. After their first attempt to escape from the court was discovered, they planned another one with the help of La Mole. But they were caught and imprisoned, while La Mole would pay with his head for his audacity by orders of Catherine de Medici, leaving Margot devastated. Soon a commission was appointed to hear the case of Alençon and Navarre. When Henri of Navarre submitted a statement written by Margot, the commissioners were left surprised to hear his eloquent defense. Margot had saved her husband's life again. Shortly after that, Charles IX died, and in February 1575, Henri d'Anjou was crowned king as Henri III of France, to the delight of his mother. About that, Margot said, he was the god of her idolatry, at the shrine of whose will she sacrificed everything. When Alençon was able to escape from the Louvre in September 1575, the king was furious. Believing that Margot had been an accomplice of her brother's escape, he decided to place her under arrest in her own apartments. Meanwhile, Henri of Navarre was having an affair with Madame de Sauve, but in his spare time he was making plans for his escape. And one day in February 1576, under the pretense of hunting, he was able to escape after more than 3 years in captivity, but without taking leave of Margot. After the flight of her husband, the Queen of Navarre had to endure a more severe confinement. But whilst in captivity, she dedicated her time to studying, saying, I had found a secret pleasure during my confinement from the perusal of good books, to which I had given myself up with delight. Realizing how important it was to have his wife in his camp, Henri of Navarre wrote letters to Marguerite saying he wanted to see her. So, trying to obtain permission to join her husband, Margot presented herself before the Queen Mother and the King, saying, I did not marry for my own pleasure, nor at my own desire, but since you have chosen my husband for me, you cannot prevent me sharing his fortune. But Henri III declared that since the King of Navarre has turned Huguenot again, he would never approve of her going to him. Many months would pass before Margot was finally granted permission to join her husband in Gascony. In December 1578, the 25-year-old Queen of Navarre made her entry into Nérac, the capital of the Duchy of Albret and the residence of her husband. For some time, the couple, who seemed to have agreed upon a policy of mutual tolerance, lived in harmony. At Nérac, Margot set up a court of cultural activities where men of letters, philosophers and poets came to share ideas with the Queen of Navarre. 3 years passed before the king no longer took pleasure in his wife's society, being involved in an affair with one of the queen's ladies-in-waiting, who was intriguing against Margot. The inability to have children also caused Margot a great deal of sorrow, and at the end of January 1582 she left Nérac, accepting the invitation of her ill-inclined brother, the king, to return to Paris. But things were about to take a different turn for Margot, when she got involved in a love affair with Harlay de Champvallon, whom she had found irresistible. One evening in August 1583, there was a ball at the Louvre, and the king invited his sister to do the honors, only to disgrace her before the court by naming all the lovers she had been involved with since her marriage. In tears, Margot listened to her brother ordering her to leave Paris. Almost without funds and abandoned by her family, Margot asked her husband to allow her to join him. But having heard the news of the scene at the Louvre, he hesitated to receive her back and requested an explanation from Henri III. Moreover, Henri of Navarre was involved himself in an affair with the Countess of Gramont. So some months passed before he sent his wife news that he was prepared to receive her. In April 1584, Margot returned to Nérac, but she soon realized that her efforts of reconciliation with her husband were futile. A few weeks later, when her brother Alençon died, she lost her only support. As Henri III did not have any children, he named Henri of Navarre as his successor, making him heir presumptive to the French crown. Margot was not pleased. Also, the accession of a Protestant king to the throne was unthinkable to the Catholics. Another civil war was unavoidable, and the Duke of Guise and the Holy League began organizing their forces. As Margot was not useful to her husband's political interests anymore, he began to ignore her completely. Increasingly isolated at Nérac, Marguerite had to change tactics. She left Nérac and established herself at Agen with the support of the League, planning to become an independent sovereign in defiance of both her husband and her brother. In March 1585, she was welcomed by the townspeople of Agen, and in a few days she had a little army gathered in and around Agen. Her husband was amused on hearing such reports and made jokes with his mistress about Margot. But Henri III and the Queen Mother were furious about Margot's undertakings, and Catherine declared, "I perceive that God has left me this creature for the punishment of my sins by the afflictions which every day she occasions me." Henri III sent orders to one of his marshals to make war upon his sister. Unfortunately for Margot, while waiting for assistance from the League, she ran out of money. The Duke of Guise begged Philip II to send assistance, but the money promised by Spain did not reach her. When Margot imposed taxes to raise funds to strengthen the defenses of the town, her subjects revolted, and she had to flee, taking refuge at Carlat, where Henri III, annoyed at his sister's dealings with the Duke of Guise, sent her orders to leave the chateau. After she left Carlat, she was captured by the governor of the Château d'Usson, who informed her that he had orders from her brother, the king, to arrest her. Her estates and pensions were seized, and Margot was taken to the Château d'Usson, a fortress that had been used as a prison, where she arrived in November 1586. Margot, who was 33 at the time, would spend there 19 years of exile. In December 1588, when she learned of the assassination of the Duke of Guise by orders of Henri III, she was devastated. A few days later, she heard about the death of her mother, whom Henri III had convinced to disinherit Margot in favor of Charles of Valois, the illegitimate son of Charles IX. At Usson, where Margot lived in relative poverty, she spent her time writing her memoirs, reading and receiving visits from poets and writers. Meanwhile, outside the walls of Usson, events followed events. In August 1589, Henri III was assassinated. A few years later, Margot's husband abjured his faith and became Catholic, and in February 1594, he was crowned King of France. On such a momentous event, Marguerite wrote to her husband, Henri IV, to congratulate him. The king, who was aware that a legitimate heir would strengthen his position, wrote to his wife to obtain from her a divorce. The negotiations lasted for a few years, and finally, in December 1599, the marriage of Henri de Bourbon and Marguerite de Valois was dissolved. About marriage, Marguerite said, "Let no one ever say that marriages are made in heaven. The gods would not commit so great an injustice." Marguerite, who was 46 at the time, was allowed to retain the title of Queen of France and Duchess of Valois. In October the following year, the king married Marie de Medici, and in September 1601 she gave birth to a son, the future Louis XIII. Still at Usson, 5 years after her divorce from Henri IV, Margot sent him a letter asking for his permission to travel to Paris to plead before the Parlement of Paris and claim back her estates, which Catherine had left to Margot's nephew. She promised that if successful, she would bequeath the property to the king's son. The king agreed, and in 1605 Margot returned to Paris after 19 years. In August that year, Henri met her at the Louvre and presented her to Marie de Medici. Margot established friendly relationships with Marie and the king and was delighted to see the little Dauphin. After she gained the lawsuit against her nephew and was declared as the rightful owner of her mother's estates, Margot executed a deed conveying them to the Dauphin. Margot remained in Paris, where she built a new house and spent her time surrounded by artists and writers. Every year she gave money to poor girls and helped struggling artists and political refugees. After the king's death in 1610, Margot remained attached to Marie de Medici, offering her support during the regency for the young king. Queen Margot, the last survivor of the noble house of Valois, died 5 years later at the age of 61.